start.
You need a clapper.
Yes, I
Yep.
do. Okay.
Action.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Old Lady Hour with Lorrie and Sheryl. Today's guest is the renowned and award-winning Jeremy Butler. He's agreed to be our guest on today's show.
So
And
happy to be here.
We're so happy to have him. He is such a Renaissance man that we don't really know where to start, but we're going to start with the photos that he's taken. He's now a photographer, and we actually had a show here at the studio back in March of all his churches that were photographed at night. So Tuscaloosa County Churches at night. It was a very successful show. We really enjoyed it, and so we're going to talk about that and then delve into everything else and try to remain away from the threshold of boredom. So we did a little research on Jeremy's, and also before I go too much farther, today's episode is brought to you by Jericom Industries, and so we're very appreciative of their support.
They're very wide-reaching. Jericom Industries are. Well, thanks, Lorrie, Sheryl. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here, and I'm so grateful that you were enthusiastic enough about these photos I took that you put them across the wall that I'm currently looking at, because they made quite a display.
And if you can't see this wall, but we'll post some pictures on our YouTube. Which, by the way, what is it? Like, subscribe, share, something like
right.
that. Some sort of order.
Do that.
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm an old lady. I don't know. So
I feel like I feel honored to be sort of an
Honorary old lady.
an honorary old lady.
and you are.
Yeah, in many ways. In many ways. Well, since you mentioned these church photographs, maybe I'll start there.
Please do.
So about 2 years ago or so, I was wandering around trying to find interesting things to photograph, and I came across a tiny, tiny, tiny church whose title is the Glorious Pentecostal Church of God. And the building that it's in couldn't hold more than 20 people. And so the disjunction between this name, the Glorious Pentecostal Church of God, and its very modest building was striking to me. And I thought, this is an interesting photo subject. And so I took a picture of this small church, and then I realized that within a mile of my house in Northport, Alabama, there are at least a dozen small churches, just in tiny little storefronts and a few just kind of standalone buildings. And so I started photographing these tiny churches. And then I was taking a photography class at the Rhode Island School of Design, an online class, because I was interested in sort of pushing, well, really learning more digital photography skills, because I had experience with film photography.
And I think this is one of our themes, is that education and learning continue throughout your life. And that is one way of growing old but not getting dead.
Dead in your head.
Dead in the head, and just like stopping is like to do something that you've not really done before, or adding to a skill that you've already had. And so I think I was intrigued by you taking this class.
Yeah, well, I think that's an excellent theme to pursue. And I'll put a plug in for the only book about retirement that I actually found useful before I retired. And its title, I'm not going to remember the author, but its title is How to Retire Happy, Wild, and Free.
Oh, I like it. Especially
And
the wild part.
exactly. And there's no financial advice in it at all, but it's very concrete suggestions about how your retirement years can be enjoyable and enriching, and you can continue to learn. And so, just as you're saying, Lorrie, it advocates for developing new interests, new hobbies. It advocates for figuring out ways to find new friends. And when you get older, it gets harder and harder to make new friends.
It does, and part of what I find is that it's very easy to get isolated.
Exactly.
And and since we've already been through a practice isolation during the pandemic, we don't really want to go back to that. So part of also us doing this podcast, which is wild and Also,
Free
as I said, free, and it is free.
until you monetize it.
Well, we're always looking for money, of course.
Ernie
So,
Zelinski.
okay.
Ernie Zelinski. I knew I wasn't going to remember his name, but that
Okay.
is indeed the author of How to Retire Happy, Wild, and Free. It's maybe 20 or even 30 years old. Sheryl is our research assistant here.
She is. She's our producer. I'm gonna have. She's here. She's doing the production today.
Yeah,
In the studio. And in the studio,
yeah.
which is not
Headquarters,
just.
HQ.
It is not only an art studio. I guess right now we're recording studio.
So many studios.
Yes. And so anyway, well, go on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm
So
interrupting.
How to Retire Happy, Wild, and Free. I've recommended it over and over again, and everybody reads it, just loves it because it talks about techniques you can use to find new friends and how you can find new interests. So photography had long been an interest of mine, but film photography,
Yes.
with a film
So
camera.
how is it different? How is film photography different than still photography?
Well, there's a lot of things that do carry over, but one of the critical things that is quite different is the way that digital photography allows you to adjust the sensitivity to light of the sensor for every single shot.
Hmm.
As you know, Lorrie, when you're doing film photography, you get a roll of film that is ranked according to ASA for a certain sensitivity to light. And you put that roll of film in your camera, and that means you are locked into that
Whatever
sensitivity to light, that
you've got.
ASA, whatever you've got. There's some exceptions, you can push it, things like that, but essentially you're locked into it. Digital photography introduces the notion of ISO instead of ASA.
Okay.
And ISO is a rating of how sensitive to light your camera is, but you can change it every single time you take a photograph.
Mm-hmm.
The film photography, you're locked into one sensitivity. Digital photography, you can change it every single time. So, for example, the camera I'm using to shoot nighttime photos has an ISO that starts at 100, which is going to be the finest grain, the sharpest image, and goes up to 64,000. That might be the wrong number, but it's some
Close enough.
astronomical number.
Numbers.
It's numbers, schmumbers, exactly. So that's one of the key differences that I had to learn, is that I had to get out of that mindset that, oh, I'm locked into a certain ASA. And one interesting thing I learned about ISO in this class is that it's not an acronym. ASA is something like, I don't know, Association of Standards Association, but ISO is not, because there was an organization got together to figure out a standard for sensitivity to light for digital cameras. International organization. They could not settle on an acronym for this measurement of sensitivity to light. So instead, they chose the word ISO from the Greek that, or maybe it's Latin, that is the prefix for like isomorphic or whatever.
That sounds Greek. So again, we are very educational here.
Yes, we are. So what I learned is that it stands for an agreement, something together. Like an isosceles triangle has two sides that are the same.
Yeah.
So ISO just means agreement, basically.
Well, that is because
Isn't
you
that
would
sweet?
you would assume that it's
No, I
something
actually would have assumed that it stood for
society.
what did you say?
Standards.
Standards
Organization.
right?
Exactly. And it's funny because this is my second RISD class. And the first one, the instructor said, people think this stands for something. It doesn't. And so I looked it up and, oh, yeah, it doesn't stand. But my second professor, she thought it did. She thought it was an acronym.
Right.
And I had to hold myself back, being a former professor myself, from being the wise ass student saying, excuse me, professor.
Yeah. So as how many years were you a professor?
40.
40 years.
That's a lot.
40 years of professing. And,
that's a lot.
And
that doesn't even count 2 years of being a teaching assistant.
Okay. So
it's a lot.
It is a lot. So now going back to being a student, do you find it challenging or
very.
Okay. Because you're used to being the one telling people kind of what to do.
Yeah. And I had to be humble. I had to be humble because I was there to learn, and this was at RISD. the class I took was a beginning class because it's a prerequisite for other more advanced classes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I did know like 60% of what was taught in the class,
Mm-hmm.
but to be a, it would, yeah, I just had to be very circumspect on what I said to other students and what I said to the teacher. And yeah, so I kind of reined myself in,
Wait,
but I learned, and one of the key things, and Sheryl knows this because she's done
mm-hmm.
online photography classes too,
Mm-hmm.
is that it gives you certain prompts and certain assignments and certain deadlines, and it forces you to think about photography in new ways. So even though I knew what f-stops meant and what this meant, what that meant, um, I needed to be pushed, and that brings us back. This is a callback. That's why
Yes.
in
Yes.
in comedy they call it a callback.
Okay.
This brings us back to our churches.
Yes. And like why churches? Because as we know, but our new audience does not. Our audience of millions is what we assume. Multitudes. 5,000, not including the women and children, which that did always bother me in biblical verses. Anyway, but you are not a churchgoer,
I
and
call myself a fallen Unitarian.
a fallen Unitarian is it's not very far to fall as a Unitarian.
Precisely.
So what was it that just really inspired you? And also, like at night, there was a specific, but
Right.
both of those choices, and then you'll be able to see on our video or the YouTube feed um, the very specific way that you framed the photos, which
Right.
were just very formal.
Yeah. So the so I feel disconnected from churches, and here in the South, church culture is massive. And so that's one way that I've never felt like I, felt like I fit in
Mm-hmm.
the South. I mean, and there's other ways that I could sort of accommodate Southern culture, but especially Christian religion and the more fundamentalist components of it is just a total mystery to me. So I find these buildings mystifying.
Okay.
And I asked a friend of mine whose whose brother is a pastor in a predominantly African American church here in town. So she's tapped into church culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked her about these tiny little churches, and she referred to them as family churches.
Yes.
Oh, you're familiar with this then?
Yes, I am.
So what does a family church mean to you?
It just means the church home that you have. So they will actually have homecomings for churches.
Huh.
So it's where your family went to church, and it doesn't matter that you are now somewhere else or you don't go to church or whatever. That's still you can't escape it. Like that is your family home.
Hmm.
So I mean, and there's a similar there's similarities with, say, even in the Catholic Church. Once you're baptized and confirmed into the Catholic Church, it doesn't matter if you leave. You can't. Guess what you are, according to them. So, but I think there's definitely like a geographical and family connection. So, that's my understanding.
Yeah, no, that makes sense too. I and I'm so, like I say, disconnected from this that I may have completely misunderstood. But I thought she was alluding to the fact that basically one family goes to that church.
Well, if there's part of it's that part of it is that is your church family. So the church I grew up in initially was the Free Methodist Church, and we had called everyone brother and sister in the Lord. So, um, which carries over to a lot of smaller fundamentalist churches. But my grandmother was the Reverend Helen Colson. She was
Oh,
a
she was a
reverend.
reverend herself?
She was the Free Methodist Church was a break off from the Methodist Church, and they ordained women. So she was a preacher and ordained, but she went by. If you really wanted to make her feel good, you would call her Sister Colson.
Oh, yeah.
So I told my husband that when we were first dating. I said, when you see my grandmother, call her Sister Colson. And he did. And oh, she really loved him. Anyway.
That's interesting. Well, my own background has some major religious figures in it. My middle name is Gaylord, and my namesake is Gaylord Starren White,
Ah,
he's my great grandfather, and he was associated with Union Theological Seminary in New York City. In
mhm.
fact, he was the dean of students, I think was his title. And he was also the director of a settlement house that they ran in New York City, which is a community center. The settlement movement was a late 19th, early 20th century movement in which these community centers would, the people who worked, social workers who worked in them, lived in these houses,
Mhm.
and they
Was
served the neighborhood.
was it started by Dorothea Dix? Do I have that right?
No, it's
Or
not Dorothea Dix. It started in the first one is in London at Toynbee Hall,
okay.
but here in the U.S., oh shoot, I'm blocking her name. There was a famous one in Chicago. I want to say Jane Addams. I'm sure our research assistant
Yeah,
will look
we'll
into
have to,
that later.
but that's really off the beaten path,
That's
but
off the beaten path.
that's where we want to go. We want
Yeah.
to take them.
Well, settlement houses is just a short tangent about them. They fascinate me because they the premise behind them was not that social workers come into a neighborhood and tell everybody what to do,
Hmm.
which is often what social workers do.
Hmm.
Instead, the basic premise was the social workers lived in the neighborhood and learned from their neighbors, and from that, based on that, sought ways to help them. And so, Union Settlement, which is still going on now, they said their 130th
Okay.
anniversary, was is located in East Harlem, and my great grandparents lived at Union Settlement. My grandmother, their daughter, was living at that settlement when my grandfather came to work there. Romance blossomed,
Right.
and they married at Union Settlement, and they continued to live at Union Settlement. Um, so it's a
Yeah,
fascinating.
yada yada yada. Jeremy taking pictures of churches.
Exactly. So circling back to this RISD class I took, I had been taking photographs of churches during the daytime, and I specifically shot them as forthright as possible, meaning no dynamic angles,
Hmm.
no weird lenses, no strange filters, no high angle, low angle. I just shot them as simply as possible to emphasize the simplicity of the structure,
Hmm. Hmm.
because these were mostly really small churches. So at the end of this RISD class, we had an assignment to make a portfolio, 15 photographs on a specific theme. Well, I thought I got this made. Churches. In fact, I've got like 30 photos of churches all ready to go. I could just skip to the head of the class. But then I thought, no, I need to push myself. As
Hmm.
Lorrie Lane says, it's important to you learn and continue to educate yourself
That's right. And set up challenges.
and set up challenges for yourself. So I thought, I'll shoot these churches at night because that's something I hadn't done before with them. And I specifically did not want to use a flash. So that meant using longer shutter speeds, longer exposures. So I set my camera up on a tripod and I would open up the shutter for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds to capture an image of these churches at night without them being lit up the way that a flash
Hmm.
lights up
Hmm.
something.
Hmm.
Um, so, and then the only things that I did to them afterwards is I made the sky, the night sky, as black as possible.
Yes. And
Uh,
that does show up in the prints.
yeah, so it is opaque. It's not just sort of dark. It is black, black, black.
Hmm.
It's an absence of any light,
Yes.
which I like because it really makes the churches, which are illuminated just by street lights or the moon, it really makes them pop from this inky blackness around them.
Right. And also and some of them you can see little stars
Yeah,
moving.
I
So
know.
that's really fun. You
It's
can see a little movement in those
exactly one
stars.
of the things that is fascinating about photography is you see things that you don't see with the naked eye.
Yeah, and that's really, and to still make everything still, which is what I do in a painting. Is it does kind of stop time.
Exactly.
So
It freezes time. But as they're suggesting, since that the shutter was open for 10, 15, even 30 seconds, there would be little stars that you could see in the blackness. But since the Earth continued to rotate, those little stars are dashes instead of pinpricks.
just reminds us we keep moving.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
no matter what. Now, since you were out there at night with the camera and
Yeah,
a tripod,
yeah.
did anyone ever stop and ask what you were doing?
What the hell are you doing? Um, Only twice so far. I was saying to our mutual friend Steve Davis earlier today that shooting at night does carry some risks that shooting during the day doesn't have, like traffic.
Right, that's
I
right.
was making a photograph last night of the Drish House, which you're
Oh yeah.
familiar with, which is a
Uh-huh.
nice spooky subject to shoot at night. But to shoot it head on, I basically had to stand in the road, and I was sure somebody was going to run me over.
They might. It is Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, exactly. And some of these small churches are in sort of rundown areas of town too, and you've got $1,000 camera and whatever. And I was like, well, should I be out here at night? But so far, I just had one guy. I was shooting, and I can't remember the title now, but it's like the something or other Church Incorporated, and um, it's in a storefront, and next to the storefront was a fried chicken place, just a little, just
Hmm.
stuck in the.
Hmm.
And so the guy from the fried chicken place came out as he was driving. This is like 9 o'clock at night, I guess. And he asked me, so what's going on? And I think he was concerned I was taking a picture of his place,
Oh,
maybe.
okay. Yes.
And so I leaned on the fact that I was a student in a class. I said, well, I got this class assignment. I'm supposed to be taking.
Did he believe it? Or
Oh, he was fascinated. He's like,
okay.
really? How did that work? And how can you
Okay.
take pictures? And we're best friends now.
Okay.
So
Well, good. 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 Because that is, and um, do you make a conscious effort not to have any people in your photos?
uh,
Because
I
that would present some other issues, I would
yeah,
imagine.
yeah, it does. And um, I haven't thought so much about people as I have about cars,
Okay. Yeah.
because often I'm shooting across the street from a church in order to get the whole church in
Hmm.
frame.
Hmm.
And initially, I was being as cautious as possible about not getting cars
Hmm.
zipping in front of the camera. Um, but when you have if it's busy, if the street is busy at all, if you've got it open, like your shutter open for 20 seconds, there's going to be a car.
Right.
So I was kind of trying to time these things, and then I was like, well, why am I bothering? Because as you know, Lorrie, if you've got a long exposure like that going on and a car zips by, the car itself doesn't register.
It's just the light from the car.
It's just the light from the car.
And you've showed us some photos where that happens. So it's just a stream of light.
Yeah, it's much like the moving stars
Yes.
in the sky, is that you just see a trail, a light trail. And one photo I took had these light trails and just a ghostly image of a truck called something logistics. So I thought it was being like the Phantom, the ghost logistics truck. So now I'm open to the idea of there being um, these light trails in the image.
Well, and I think that when you're taking a photograph, people assume it's real life. A photo is real life,
Yeah,
but they don't realize that it's all decisions, and it's all how it's cropped, and how light exposure, what and like
angle.
any art is like you're making multiple decisions that are not real life, and really, um I get this a lot about how people are like, oh, we love this painting because it looks like a photograph. And I mean, that is interesting, but we don't really see the way the camera sees. And we don't really remember so there's a lot of differences. And
Yeah,
so it's interesting, looking at photographs and seeing, okay, Do I take out all moving objects? Do I leave them in because that's really just what happened? Um, anyway,
Yeah, there's a couple of comments I could make about that, and one is that sort of these sort of photographs fall into the general photography category of street photography,
okay,
which is not. I mean, mine are literally of streets
right.
sometimes, but it's when you take a camera out on the street and you capture moments that you discover with your camera.
And I have to mention one of the things that I noticed about on your social media pages, your photos, was the Bud Litter series. And so I know it's probably just kind of jokey, but can you like so Jeremy's been taking pictures of Bud Light blue Bud Light cans with white lettering, so they stand out. That blue is really bright blue, and he calls it Bud Litter, and he just finds them out in the wild and takes photos and posts them. And so, can you just talk a little bit about your Bud Litter series? Because I really enjoy it. I like it a lot.
Sometimes there's a cigarette butt.
Yeah, that tells a story. It's a whole party story. Sometimes there'll be a cigarette butt next to it or whatever. So, um, the Bud Litter series. I wasn't anticipating that would come up today, but I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay, yeah,
But if I may finish a
yes.
thought, let's put a pin in it.
All right.
Isn't that what they say sometimes? Let's put a pin in that.
All right.
Because I definitely want to talk about that. But I want to respond to your comment about photographs being assumed to be to duplicating to be since film and film photography um, are mechanical reproductions
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
what you're seeing. There is an assumption that they are real life.
That's right.
And just as you were explaining, there's so many things that go in, so many decisions that are made while the photographer is taking a picture, which way to point it, what sort of film or camera you're using, what sort of, is it going to be high angle, is it going to be low angle, is it going to be, so all those decisions. So within the history of the cinema and the history of photography, there's definitely been this long split between those who are trying to make images and films that are as close to a replication of reality as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and those who are saying, screw that,
Mm-hmm.
we should use all the possibilities that are at our disposal to make it as different from what you're seeing as possible.
And I think is interesting in early photography, photographers had fun with that. It looks like they did a lot of, and they made like scenes with fairies and ghosts, and
That's right.
they just had double exposure, which I
Isn't
don't.
it Lewis Carroll that did that?
Yeah, he
That did the
did.
photos of fairies?
Yeah, and so I think just it was interesting how playful they were at some point. I think growing up closer to like Life magazine in the 70s, and then they got very serious.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's to give you just another example of it, if you look at the history of film and the arrival of sound, right? So we experience the world in both audio and visual,
Yes.
unless we're, hearing
Oh,
impaired.
sure.
Um, so the real world is a
Hmm.
world with sound,
Yes.
but cinema initially was silent,
Hmm.
and the technology for adding sound to film didn't arrive until the late 1920s.
Hmm.
When it did arrive, there were many filmmakers who were completely opposed to the addition of sound to their films
So that's interesting.
because they felt it ruined the artistic nature. They felt that silent film was perfectly capable of communicating a story without sound,
Sure.
and that indeed without sound you could focus more on the visual,
Which you can,
which you
really.
can.
Yeah.
So it's just another indication of that split that there has always been in the history of the cinema, history of film. I mean, photography is these two impulses between making something as abstract and using as many of the elements of the camera as you can, and trying to replicate the world that you see.
Right.
Um,
And okay, we're taking a break.
Hey, I keep forgetting to ask you guys to like and subscribe and maybe even share our work because some of your friends might like it. Thanks.
We're back from our little break. And here we're still here with Jeremy Butler, and we're talking about reality versus maybe
Art,
artistic choices in film and
painting.
painting and in photography. They're all related
Yep.
as visual medium.
Yep.
And so, um,
So we've been talking about the church photographs I did.
yes.
So I'll make one last comment about that, and then we can move on to Bud Litter if you want.
Yes.
So shooting them at night, initially I just saw it as a challenge, as almost a technical challenge. But I found afterwards that I really like the way they look, and that it it's a way of representing churches that is not commonly done. So I think it encourages you to look at them in a new way.
That's what I felt, and that's what it when you posted them online, so I could see. I saw the photos then, and then you actually were asking advice on like how to have where to have an exhibit, and I jumped at the chance. I'm like, oh, let's have it here, and so I'm really glad we did. It was a really great show. Some of you in town got to see it, and we do have prints from Jeremy at the studio. They're available for sale. You can have your own version. And in fact, I have one of the glorious Pentecostal churches. It's on the street near where we had our first house in Tuscaloosa, and we still my husband's retirement project is restoring a house, so near there. So
Yeah.
so we're it has like got some personal interest to me too.
Well, I was very grateful for you to offer me that opportunity, Lori. It was so much fun, especially at the opening.
Yeah,
To
we had a great time.
Yeah, we had a good crowd, and it was just fun to answer people's questions about how I shot these things, and I think that also presenting churches just kind of lost in this inky gloom.
Hmm.
Uh, it, it I don't know. Perhaps it makes you think about them in a different way, or there's a
To me,
there's
it's a kind of almost a romantic look. I mean, and not romantic like Hearts and Flowers, but like the romantics
like
from the
ironic.
19th century. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, a little bit. There was something not mundane about them. There was something, yeah, and I think that's it because they're standing out and they seem a little like maybe a little mystical.
yeah,
Maybe there's something going on that's
yeah. I
yeah,
get that too.
out of the just the day to day. So even though you were filming something or taking photos of something very, you know, just street scenes, but there's something else going on, which is what when I look at art that I like, that's kind of what
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's an old principle in art theory that art should make the familiar seem strange.
yes, which is a good introduction to your Bud Litter series.
That's right. So yeah, so my butlers, it's all based on the Russian notion of ostranение,
Oh,
which is defamiliarization to make. Yeah, Sheryl knows. She's familiar with the ostranение.
she was shaking her head. Oh yes, I know this very well.
Yeah, so I'll restrain myself from slipping into professor mode, but in the 20s, that's what the Russians called it, ostranение, and it just means to take familiar things and make them seem strange. So to take something that is so familiar to you that it becomes invisible
Hmm.
and make it visible. So the church,
Yes,
the
similar.
glorious Pentecostal
Hmm.
Church of God that was in your old neighborhood,
Hmm.
you probably drove by it hundreds of times and
That's
didn't
right.
give it a second thought and
That's
didn't
right.
really look to see what the building, how it was built, or what, the little sign that's on it, or you, when something becomes that familiar, it becomes invisible. And the same is true with litter.
Yes.
That all the trash we see on the side of the street, we don't really see it. We just kind of recognize maybe we don't even think about it at all, but it becomes invisible. So I ride my bike around town a lot. I walk around town a lot, and so the litter became more visible to me doing that. And I noticed that the beer cans, of which there are many in my neighborhood, I won't exaggerate. I would I would say 90% of those beer cans are Bud Light beer cans. And
That's
that is an accurate, I mean, I
that's
think I
really
actually counted once. It is astonishing how few other, and Bud Light, it's terrible beer. Who likes Bud Light? It's
well,
watered down.
maybe that's why they're throwing the cans out all the time.
I occasionally find a full one. It's true.
By the way, a little disclaimer here that this is Jeremy's opinion. Don't sue us, Bud Light,
Oh, you're gonna get hate mail.
the king of beers, or is that something? That's Miller Light.
No, I think that's
No,
Budweiser.
That's Bud Light.
But it's
Okay.
not Bud Light. It's like Budweiser proper.
Okay.
Nobody's calling Bud Light the fucking king of beers.
Nope.
Again, my opinion.
Yes.
But
I don't like any beer, so I don't have an opinion. So there we go.
I have celiac disease. I can't drink any beer.
Okay,
So,
so
you
yeah,
know, it's all.
I don't like Bud Light.
Okay, there we go. We have a beer drinker here in the room
No,
that
I said I
confirms.
like beer. I didn't say I drink it.
And
Oh,
yet,
splitting the hairs.
Cheryl, we're a bunch of not well. Okay, no, I'm not. I can't say non-drinkers because I really
No.
I do appreciate a glass of wine
Yeah, okay.
Or two.
or two or three. Lately. But,
Wow.
I have a beer every 6 months or so.
Okay. But anyway,
She's
but
a regular beer drinker.
but
She has
the-
an interval she has to
But the
follow.
litter part of this
Yeah,
is
so-
interesting.
So why all this anyway? I took a few pictures of Bud Light cans
Did
and
you
posted
take them with your phone camera or
Yeah.
your special camera? Okay.
just with my phone camera and posted them on social media. And one of my friends said, "Oh, Bud Light litter. You should call that hashtag Bud Litter."
Yes.
And so I created the hashtag Bud Litter that has spread throughout the world now.
Yeah, it is famous.
And it is pretty funny how many people have sent me photos of Bud litter that they have found in their own.
Well, and
locales.
I have to admit, when I got excited when I saw Bud Litter, I'm like, oh, look at that! It was like I found something special, and so you
It
did
is
make
special.
it non-invisible. You really did. Which I have something similar when I started painting the traffic barrels.
Exactly.
So same idea. I have paintings of traffic barrels, which they're the barrels, not the cones necessarily. So I'm very specific about it. And part of that was like, we're in Tuscaloosa. They're always doing projects, which is good. It is the price of progress. And particularly when I moved into the Lorrie Lane Studio
On Fifth Street.
on Gary Fitz Street, and it was still 6th Street. Again, not easy to say.
What a dumb
we
move.
are
Here's
adjacent.
another opinion. That was dumb.
That was dumb.
Changing the name to 6th Street to Fifth Street was dumb.
It should be like at least Fitz Avenue or something a little easier to say. But in any case, we are adjacent to another very long name, Lurleen Wallace Boulevard.
Lurleen B. Wallace Boulevard.
Lurleen B. Wallace Boulevard north. South. No, north. It's north. It's going north. It's one way, and then the following street, the only really one-way streets downtown. So people always, at least once a day, someone goes the wrong way because they're like, there's only this one-way street, and they're going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Kind of dangerous.
So the Lorrie Lane Studios you'll find at the corner of Lurleen B. Wallace Boulevard and the Gary A. Fitz Street.
Yes. So there we go. So I mean,
That's my radio voice.
And as it is your radio voice, and I continue to say to people, and Lorrie Lane is right there.
Yeah.
They could
Lorrie
have
Lane.
named
Yeah.
it.
Why
Lorrie
isn't it
Lane.
So
Lorrie
simple. It would have been so simple.
In any case, the
Fitz Street.
construction project which is a state highway, so there was a state project, and
It went on for 30 years.
It went on for so long, and there were many, many days when nothing was happening, but they sure had a lot of traffic barrels. So anyway, I started painting traffic barrels as an art project, and same kind of idea. I mean, people actually think they're funny, and they're kind of anthropomorphic. They look like they're about the size of a small child or a toddler, and so yeah, we have them scattered about. And yeah, it's the same thing. People just started sending me pictures of them all the time, and so now I am associated with traffic barrels the same way that you may be associated with Bud Litter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that was how hashtag Bud Litter began. But I have to say, there were certain pretensions about this,
Okay,
which is,
do be pretentious.
which is, excuse me, uh, every time I shoot one, I try to find an interesting way to shoot it.
Okay.
So it gets back to our sort of art versus
Mhm,
reality
mhm.
explanation. I'm trying to figure out ways to make this bud can look different, not beautiful necessarily,
Sure.
but different. And so I never plop it in the middle of the frame. I always put it like at the bottom of the frame. It's kind of falling out. I try to shoot it so that there's like an interesting design in the street or
Do you,
interesting textures
a
from
lot
the
of art
gravel.
decisions about it.
Pardon me?
A lot of art decisions about it.
Precisely. So should I shoot it just straight down, perpendicular down, or should there be an angle to it? What's the lighting like on that day? I usually go walking in the morning, so I often get morning light, which is, kind of, as you know, sort of slanted in from the side. So
Much better light.
some people think of it as golden
Yes, it
hour.
is. It is.
And so every single time I've shot one has been an attempt to shoot it differently, which is a challenge because it's the same freaking can every
They are
time.
smushed different ways.
That's true. Some are smushed, some are cut up by lawnmowers, some are crinkled. So there is something to work with.
Yeah. Which is also that was kind of what I found. Now I'm noticing, and people do notice, like traffic barrels and how they get really beat up. So when they're really all smushed and they look very sculptural, or they look like they have like a little face, or you start seeing things in them that really aren't there. So they start becoming these kind of art objects
Yeah.
in a weird way. The
Yeah,
same with.
exactly.
So have you ever been out looking for them and not found them and been disappointed?
Never.
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 Okay.
Every single walk I've taken, there are hundreds that I have not photographed.
Do
Let me
you
put it
ever
that way.
do you pick them up or do you just leave
Every
them?
time.
Oh, okay. So
I recycle them. Well, I shouldn't say it. So there's times when I'm just in a rush or whatever,
Sure.
but most of the time I always pick them up and recycle them. And in my neighborhood, we have curbside recycling.
yes.
And so often my recycling bin is filled with Bud Litter
Oh, that's
cans.
funny.
And so I'm sure my neighbors think, boy, he really likes the Bud Light, that Butler. But honestly, yeah, I do try to find a different way. And so when I, on rare occasions, print them, I think they look great in a frame.
They do.
They look pretty distinctive. And I guess I've had two shows in which, and most recently, when Lorrie hosted the Land of the Free
Yes.
exhibition, which was another stellar event.
Yes, it was.
I contributed a photograph of that was of rusty train tracks with Bud Litter squished in the middle of it. So, but I think that taking them also, some friends of mine have objected to it to this Bud Litter series, because they think I'm making fun of Bud Light drinkers, and indeed I kind of am. I got to say, I sort of am, because I think it's watered down beer. So friends of mine, though, have said, well, that's just being kind of snarky and condescending that you would.
But isn't that what the fun is about?
Yeah.
To be snarky and condescending. That is one of our goals here. Just reminding people who might be listening, thinking we're just here for your.
The first theme is education. The second theme is snarkiness.
I'm just going to say that we started off the whole idea of the podcast because we're so judgmental.
Yes, it's true.
And so I think that is actually another art decision, as like, do you just want to be nice to everyone, or I mean, but you did not throw down the Bud Light cans.
Right. It's as much if not more, a criticism of litterers
Right.
I don't
as it
know.
is Bud Light
It's
drinkers.
it's just reality. There is, I mean, if it did not, if someone did not throw that can on the ground, you wouldn't be taking
You
pictures
would
of
not
it.
have that art.
That's true.
But also, like, you're not. It's not really criticism. It's actually recording reality.
It's a criticism.
Okay,
I mean,
but
you choose.
well, I mean, I'm
It's a
not
criticism of reality.
right, but it's also you're not creating the litter. You're
Right.
finding it and observing it and making an opinion about it, which is something you should be able to do. I mean, I didn't create the traffic barrels. I'm not really criticizing them either. I'm just noticing them. And then once you start noticing them,
Yeah.
you see that they are absolutely everywhere. And then they, to the point where I felt like for a while they were following me everywhere. Like even on my at my new house, there was for some reason they had some traffic cones out, and then somehow it was like right in front of my house. Like why? I don't know. The same thing in front of the studio for a while. They had left it for another project, and it migrated to in front of our storefront.
Yep.
So I just felt like I have some. There's some. They are attracted to me, not the other way around.
You have a certain barrel magnetism.
Something about it, or and so, but I think, yeah, uh, for your friends who are disturbed by this, um, well, that's just
Yeah.
they're just gonna have to deal with it.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's true that I'm looking down on litter bugs, and drawing attention to it. But it also, as I said, has made. I think, as you have said, it even has made you more aware of the Bud Light litter problem.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it
mean,
is everywhere.
it is, and in some states, they give you 5 cents back or
Right.
something to turn them in, so
Yeah,
that is
deposit.
that's supposed to help. I don't know if it does.
I think it might.
It does.
It might. So, like, something like that could be helpful. But, I mean, it is interesting that that is basically what you see.
Yeah.
That's,
Just Bud Light
that
everywhere.
is really funny. I mean, it is a funny thing. Like, you don't see. So right now, I'll just
Hold up the microphone.
say we are.
Can you hear the bubbles?
So we're in a fancy place, and so fancy people like sparkling water. I don't know. Can we can? This is not an endorsement,
I think the Pellegrino people will
but
be
I
jumping
really,
at the fact that
yes, I really enjoy Pellegrino non-flavored sparkling water, and so since I'm in a fancy place that we drink this here at the studio.
you chug it.
We do, and it's to make sure that I drink any water because I have a tendency to forget and
Get dehydrated.
get completely dehydrated. My daughter yells at me, and I said, "Well, I do drink coffee," and she's like, "That doesn't count. It does count. There's water in coffee." And Sheryl would attest to that since she drinks coffee all day long. Anyway, have you seen any sparkling water cans out there?
Not a single one.
So they're
We Pellegrino drinkers are not litterers.
like audience. I do want. We have a challenge to our
Listeners.
our listeners. If you see a sparkling water can out there in the wild in litter, you can't, like, no fair. You have to, like, actually find it. Send us a photo to. We don't have any way to do this yet.
Yes, we do.
Oh, we do.
Yes.
Okay, producer Sheryl, where do we send it?
oldladyhour@gmail.com.
Okay, send your photos to oldladyhour@gmail.com.
I don't think the is part of it.
Oh, just old lady hour.
I think.
We are really new at this, so we're gonna make some mistakes. But anyway, send us your photos of, and as I said, you can't cheat. Like, you have to find it out there, and then we'll take back everything we said.
That's right.
We will be
We'll
corrected.
issue a we'll issue a statement.
We will be corrected. But I do sort of. I mean, part of our aesthetic about everything is, so when I grew up in the church, going back to church ideas,
Yeah.
culture was all that you took into your mind needed to be edifying. The word edification was really important.
Yeah.
And so, trivial things, slapstick comedy, movies, mm, the devil's music, etc., secular world was not really edifying. So we're not that.
Well,
we're this. We're here for fun.
yeah. Yeah, well, it's often a criticism that's made of popular culture is that it's trivial and not edifying.
And I
And I
love
understand
trivial.
that the previous Old Lady Hour podcast fully considered the ramifications of popular culture
That
and
is
its
correct.
impact on our society. I
That's
really
correct.
enjoyed that podcast.
Yeah.
I
It's
found it very edifying.
unintentionally so.
Yes.
We're
Well, you're talking to somebody whose entire career was based on analyzing popular culture, you know, and because not only was I a film professor, I was also a television professor, and TV in the in the groves of academe got no respect.
absolutely. I think this is a good time for a break.
Yeah.
And then we'll be right back.
Hey, don't forget that Steve Davis and Lorrie Lane have a wonderful exhibition in Lowe Mill in Huntsville until July 12th, I believe. It's on the third floor gallery, and it's a sight to behold. So if you're in Huntsville, check out Lowe Mill. Thanks.
And we're back. We're back with Jeremy Butler talking about his photography and how he got into it, and we're veering off into other topics which we will save for another episode. But anyway, Jeremy, what got you started in photography?
When I was about, oh gosh, just like 10 or 11, I really became fascinated with both still photography and film. And I was the kind of kid that was always making little home movies. We made one called Tarzan Meets Ape Man and His Band of Amazons. I played Tarzan.
Okay.
And while we were doing it, I thought to myself, hey, if I did this with German titles with silent, if I did it with German titles, I could probably get extra credit in German class. So we turned it into Tarzan trifft Abmann und seine Band von Amazons. And I did get extra credit in German class. So I was always making little movies and taking still photographs. And I was really fortunate that my parents gave me a single lens reflex camera, an SLR camera, as a combination. They were expensive back then.
Yes.
As a combination birthday and graduation from high school gift.
Okay.
An Alta SRT 101, and I love that camera. Still have that camera. It's kind of amazing that 53 years later it hasn't been stolen.
Right.
Or just broken. They built like tanks. And so I saw it really as, we were talking about documentary versus art. At that time, I really thought of it slightly as a documentary project. I took photos of my friends all the time.
Oh, that's great.
Was constantly sticking this camera in their face, and because I wanted to record just mundane things.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just photographs of birthday parties
Sure.
or graduations or whatever. It was going on a picnic or walking to class, and I did the same thing with an 8mm camera. I brought it to Central High School and just shot people walking from one class to another class and people standing under a tree, and it's those mundane things that are incredibly valuable to me now 50 years later, because who can remember sort of what it looked like, what a high school campus looked like
Oh,
then,
absolutely.
or
Yeah.
what I had for lunch back then, or
Yeah,
so
just the things that no one else cares about.
exactly.
Now you really care about them because there's no other record.
There's no other record. And so I really did think of it at that time as being a record of our lives and shooting mundane things. And so to this day, that's the sort of photography I do, is things that are taken for granted, things that are overly familiar, things that are mundane, quotidian, as the academics would say.
So do you have any impulse and this is what I hear a lot of now, that we're I'm not retired, but of retirement age of, oh, well, you need to go to, Europe and paint there. And I'm like,
Oh,
well, but there's plenty of paintings of Paris, and there's really not very many paintings of Tuscaloosa, and that's what I see. So I'm kind of focused on that. I don't have that impulse to do something that's already been done a million times. So in your photography, do you feel that same way? Um,
oh,
uh,
definitely.
I'm just asking, do you have like trip photographs?
Well, I do, and as you know, Lori, I invented the selfie, which is another story I can
Yeah,
tell you at
that's
another
right. You did
time.
invent the selfie.
But just to echo what you're saying, how many photographs do we need to have of New York City or
Right,
Chicago or Los Angeles?
right.
My newest photography project is kind of channeling the spirit of William Christenberry,
Hmm.
William Eggleston, um, Walker Evans,
Hmm.
who photographed Tuscaloosa County, Hale County, which is right next door to us,
Hmm.
and shot just everyday things.
And they're classics,
And they're
really, and they
classics.
and they help you see what's really there.
Exactly.
So it's there. And I guess that's my point. It's not like you're making artistic choices about something that exists, and and allowing it to not be invisible. So you were
Yeah.
talking about uh, taking pictures of the Drish House,
Yep.
which wasn't Walker Evans, a famous photograph of the Drish House when it was an auto parts store.
1936.
Yes, and so what kind of photos are you taking of the Drish House?
Nighttime photos.
Okay, nighttime. All
Yeah,
right,
and
and of course it's notoriously haunted.
exactly. I think I got a pretty good image of it. Like just last night, actually. But my latest, here's a little preview of my next project, and that is to fully engage with William Christenberry's photographs, but shoot them at night.
Okay, and that is going to be that's very interesting, and he did the same framing maybe of that very formal,
Head
symmetrical,
on,
head-on shots of old architecture of old. I have
including
one
churches.
I have one photo that I took. That's my William Christenberry photo. That I'll have to dig it up. It's
Oh,
when I was teaching at Bibb County Correctional. I was I taught there. We did a mural project for a number of months, and there was an old general store, groceries, tiny little place. And every time I went by that, I'm like, I've got to take a picture. So one day I finally stopped and did, and got
yeah,
it that very straight on, symmetrical, and I was very proud of myself. But that's the only one I
yeah. Oh, I'd love to see
took.
that. But
I got to find it.
the as I've started digging into this, I have not been able to find a single William Christenberry or Walker Evans photograph of Hale County at night.
No, I'm
They're
sure.
all daytime.
Well, it may have been really difficult to, and
Exactly.
it's a little scary at night out there. It's very
Yeah,
dark.
it's very
There's not a
dark.
lot of lights.
It's true. I don't even know if it's feasible. I mean, some of these tiny churches he shot were out in the middle of nowhere with no street lights or anything. So I don't even know if it can be done. But
Yeah, well,
that's
it's
what
a good challenge.
that's my
That's your
latest
next
challenge. It's
challenge.
Christenberry at night.
I love it. Well, we'll maybe have to have another show here. So,
Well, that'd be great.
yeah, we can. Um, we'll see what the future brings. Well, thank you very much.
Oh,
And
my pleasure.
as I said,
Absolutely.
we haven't even touched on all of the subjects that we plan on on diving into. So stay tuned for further episodes, which will be coming out, when we feel like it. And so, um, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Sheryl, for producing this episode. And she's been working very diligently behind the scenes, doing all the editing
Turning the gears,
and
flipping the switches.
figuring out. So, anyway, thanks again, and we'll be back.
We gotta go watch our shows.
We got to watch our shows.
Thank you so much. I got some stories I got to watch too.
Okay.